The Charleston County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council is working hard on initiatives to improve the criminal justice system here in Charleston County. Today, I talked with the project director, Kristy Danford, for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Kristy Danford, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Obviously, you are the project director for the Charleston County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. And, I want to go back in time to August 3rd, because I know a press release was sent out by the Charleston County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, and it reads like this. Today, the Charleston County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, or CJCC, released a strategic plan outlining key initiatives for the next 3 years. The plan was developed on the heels of the CJJ's efforts in 2019 to engage and involve over 1,200 community members in the setting of the plan's course. Let me ask you this, Kristy. What results did you receive that is, from the previous strategic plan?
So prior to our current plan, we're about 6 years old now, almost 6 years old. And the initial effort was really to form the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. So that was to bring together system actors, leaders from all across the system, whether it was criminal justice or behavioral health, the courts, as well as community representatives, to take a good hard look at our local criminal justice system and how we were using our jail. And through the data, we were able to identify some core areas that we could build upon and improve. And then just continue to use that data and that collaboration to continually guide and make improvements. So up until the most recent strategic plan, we focused a lot on areas of trying to divert or deflect people from the criminal justice system when it could happen and happen safely, as well as make some preliminary inroads into what happens in bond court and the processing of cases, and really sort of learn how to do community engagement. So we saw some really pretty big results, but one of the things we wanted to do leading into this most recent strategic plan was engage more and more of the community in setting the course and determining the priorities for what we would do next. And that's really what led to that 1,200 community member involvement in the development of this next strategic plan that we're actively implementing.
Let me break down what you just said. Obviously, you said it's, the Charleston County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council is 6 years old. Let me ask you, from 6 years ago to right now, what is the biggest difference about the criminal justice system?
Well, I think by the numbers, looking locally, our jail population, our local population, that's folks that are sitting in our jail pre-trial, waiting for court or sentence, excludes the folks that are non-local, like being there for the federal government or other counties. That local population is almost 40% smaller than it was. The kinds of charges coming into our jail now are most frequently general sessions level. They're no longer the municipal magistrate, which used to really drive our jail population. So it's more, higher level crime. Folks that are coming in tend to stay a little bit longer. And, we have sort of more of a microscopic view into where the big challenges are and what's next. There's a lot I could go into, but that's sort of the high level of what's different.
And what are those challenges that you're working on right now?
Sure. So that is a lot to do with what can we do to make sure that folks that are getting access to these early efforts, whether it's, diverting them from the criminal justice system entirely or deflecting them into a service provider, that they're getting full wraparound care so that they're not just sort of repeatedly bumping back into law enforcement or EMS or hospitals. So that's step one, right? And then we're also looking at continually into the bond hearing process to make sure that that is as fair and meaningful as possible. We also have a very long time, somebody goes to bond court on day one, the time to disposition has been increasing in the circuit court every year. And with the pandemic, it's only gotten worse. So there's about, 400 or 500 day period between the bond hearing and when a case comes to justice. And a lot can happen in that period. Folks who can end up staying in the jail, they can get released on a recognizance bond or a money bond. but you still have to get to court. You still have to, stay out of trouble. And there's a minority of folks that are routinely not doing that, right? They're getting back into trouble, and they're getting back into trouble repeatedly. While most are doing just fine, you've got victims waiting, you've got defendants who want to get on with their life. That big window of time is really an area ripe for more work and more intervention. And then, of course, always looking to continually improve how we do community engagement and how collectively we come together to improve our system and safety for everybody in Charleston.
Now, those people who are routinely getting arrested after, I guess, given their first and second chances, what exactly are those crimes? Are those crimes consistent, or are they just different crimes with the same person?
It would be different crimes, same person. So it's what we see is a minority of folks. We've sort of studied this year over year over year, and we still see the same results, right? And a lot of that comes back to the way our pretrial system is designed in the state of South Carolina, right? You go to a bond court, bond judge can do a recognizance bond or a financial bond. And if it's a financial bond, they have to come up with some sort of money or a surety to release and secure their release from jail. And in that period, we see some consistent results. And that's most folks do just fine. But when we put money into the situation, you have, you see worse outcomes, basically. Folks tend to get money that are more risky, as well as, money is a barrier to release for a lot of folks. So it's the sort of dynamic of release on recognizance or money. All that determines is what happens on the first day. But the individuals are still there, and the individuals are still going to do what they're going to do without any other intervention in that period. And that's really where we have a big gap in the state of South Carolina. And we see it here. We've seen it in our data year over year. And that's really an area that's ripe for, more intervention and more effort.
And when you look at your current data, what is the most popular intervention for those people who are repeat offenders?
You've got the research, that's part of it is supportive services to get folks to court, to keep them out of trouble, right? And then you've got the full extreme where, if safety is really, the big factor, then you've got detention, right? You go all the way up. You go from nothing to the most restrictive, which is detention. And there's, sort of gradations of options all along the way. And the thing that we have to be mindful of is in the pretrial space, folks are presumed innocent. And maintaining their rights is an important piece of that puzzle. So if you can provide some supportive services along the way to get them on the right path by the time they get to court, that's really going to have a big bang for your buck for everybody. Right. And you also have all the way up into that most restrictive option, which is detention.
And what are those other most restrictive options?
The research is kind of mixed as to what's out there. There are things like electronic monitoring or, global position satellite tracking. Right. The research isn't super strong on that unless it's really a select targeted situation, like a domestic violence instance where you're trying to protect an individual from another individual. Sure. But there's also, a growing, focus on, just getting people on the right path. Making sure that they can be home with their family, they can go to work, they can, earn a livable wage and go on about their business. When we make it harder, then it can have negative consequences that can sort of ripple, and not only for that individual, but those around them as well.
Now, you talked earlier about wraparound care. What is that process?
So we have a unique opportunity here with our familiar faces. And can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
We use the term familiar faces to talk about the individuals that are most active, the ones that we see most routinely booked into our jail. And they, for the most part, we're looking at folks now who have 6 or more bookings or 7 or more bookings in the last year. I mean, these are very active people. And when you look into those situations, there's often, other factors, whether it's mental illness, homelessness, substance use disorders, there's a whole lot going on there. And instead of just sort of churning them through the system as usual, it's identifying, who the individual is, working with them to see what's going on, what are those underlying factors, and then really having system actors wrap around that individual to make sure that if they're going to release, they're releasing to, a stable housing environment, that they've got resources available, and knowing that they're going to fail. I mean, these are folks who are booked in and out of the jail 6 times or more. So even a reduction in the number of bookings is progress. And that's really, it's a messy process. It's not an easy process. But when you have people around the table who are sort of looking to make sure that there's no wrong door for this individual and they're there to provide those supports, you can get a whole lot, farther. We've got 2 examples. One who hasn't been back in, I think, almost over 45 days. And for this individual, that's like a really big success.
Sure.
But it's small, and it's intentionally small for now because to build it to scale, you've got to learn, along the way.
Now, obviously, when you talk about reduction in bookings, what was that like in 2019?
Well, we saw, just like most of the country, right? We saw some declines. I'm sorry, in 2020 we saw declines. Sure. But the thing I would say about Charleston that might be a little bit different than some other communities in our state is that we had already kind of turned the dial on not using jail unless it was necessary. Right. So we had already substantially decreased folks coming to jail for open container or simple possession of marijuana. So that wasn't as big of a shift for us. I mean, it just sort of continued the pattern that we were already on.
Now, let me ask you this. You talk about, obviously, mental illness and homelessness and other factors. And then you talked about the underlying factors. Have you been able to identify those thus far in 2020?
So when it comes down to what data we have, right, there's some opportunity there to do a better job of that as a system. But within the individuals, that our folks are working with, they're seeing a lot of the same, challenges. Part of it is mental illness. Part of it is perhaps self-medicating with substances or substance use disorders, homelessness. They all, can be they kind of compound each other. And that's, or you're getting, arrested for trespassing when you don't have a home to go to.
Right.
Or you're in fight or flight mode because you're not stable. Right. And those things lead to the attention of law enforcement and involvement in the criminal justice system.
Absolutely. And you talked earlier about the jail population. You talk about, obviously, you have the local population, then you have the federal and non-local population. What is that typically?
We're usually around it used to be a lot higher. It's come down. It's come down a good bit, but it's roughly around 100 to 150 on any given day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And I can look.
Oh, okay, sure, that'd be fine. That'd be awesome too.
I know. I was going to say it fluctuates all the time, but that's just sort of ballpark estimate.
Okay, and let me ask you this. You mentioned it, obviously, 1,200 community members were able to participate in this particular plan. But I know that, obviously, 4 collaborative working groups of community representatives and justice system leaders developed a dozen of initiatives for the next 3 years, drawing upon identified community priorities, system trends, and more recent lessons learned from the COVID pandemic and, of course, the growing movement that is for racial justice. What are the community priorities right now?
Well, we haven't taken a survey lately, so I can't speak from a data standpoint. I can kind of reflect back on what we learned from our engagement effort, and it still rings true. I think one thing that we learned a lot over 2020, is the active involvement of younger and younger folks, which is a wonderful thing. But we're looking a lot at how systemic racism and racial bias really influences folks' perceptions of the system and how it's working or not working. We're also looking at, a lot of their, perceptions of safety, desire for better pretrial justice, focusing on things that matter, like reducing recidivism. Right. There's, people want their criminal justice system to serve the community in a way that does more good than it does harm. And there's a lot more opportunity that we have coming together to write those and keep working at making it better for the folks that we serve.
And where exactly, this might be a crazy question, but where is the systematic racism in the criminal justice system?
The system, it's so old, right? And you got to look back at how it was designed and who designed it.
Okay.
And here we are now, hundreds of years later,
Sure.
and we see disparate impacts across the board, whether it's the color of folks that are coming, getting arrested or coming to jail, sort of how things are shaking out. And you also see those same disparate impacts everywhere else, right? You see it in education, you see it in income inequality. I mean, it's everywhere, and I think that's one of the initiatives I'm most excited about in our strategic plan is our Race Equity Fellowship Program. And the vision for that is to bring together leaders from all across the Charleston community, whether they work in business or healthcare or criminal justice, to come together through an equity fellowship program that will help train these folks to look deeply into how they're working within their area of expertise and how they can be agents of change to advance equity in what they do. Again, whether that's housing or criminal justice or education. I'm really excited about it because it's not something that is, we were fortunate to get a grant to help fund the beginning of it.
Sure.
So we'll be putting out a request for proposals in the coming months to hire curriculum developers to pilot it. And we had a really dynamic group of steering committee members that kind of represent those different fields to help shape its development. And we partnered with the College of Charleston on it. And I'm super excited for it because it gives leaders an opportunity to sort of dig in, not only to help them, with what they're going to do in their role, but also strengthen that network of leaders around the community that can work together to advance equity.
Does the local justice system understand racial equity?
We just did a survey on that just to see where folks were. And we're still processing the results from it, but I think, it depends on who you ask and where they're coming from. I think as a CJCC, that is a very important thing to our membership and our community representatives. That's something that we have looked at and focused on since we started. That's why, there's far more to do, but I think I remember the first time that we looked at equity data in the criminal justice system. And I remember the looks on people's faces, just sort of registering. I remember seeing a grown man come down in tears to see, just how many times often a Black individual was arrested, compared to a white individual, and just some of those really important data findings that just kind of threw a light on it for everybody to see. And I've seen folks come a long way in the 6 years that we've been here. And, also recognizing that we have a lot more to do and a longer way to go.
And you talk about obviously the movement of obviously for racial justice among the young demographics, for lack of a better word. Where exactly is that growing movement here in Charleston County, in your mind?
I'm eager to, I think we've got some young folks on the CJCC, which I was very excited to get our community representatives. We first started, they sort of tended to be a little older demographic. We've got some younger folks now, and they're remarkable. We've got folks who are helping to sort of shape the discussion and get more reach and get more information out there. And the thing that we keep hearing back is most folks don't know about the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. And that, this is an opportunity. This is, we represent, an ability to come together and bring diverse folks together to ground the conversation in the data and make some deliberate data guided steps forward. And that's something I hope that the young folks that are involved with us or that are starting to look us up, that they take that to heart and they get engaged with us, because the system's a very complicated thing and it takes all of us to help make it better.
How diverse is the data that you have on hand?
We look at everything from arrest data to booking information to the kinds of charges coming in, how long people are staying in our jail, to bonding practices, to whether or not, the folks that get released are getting new charges or getting failures to appear, dispositions. I mean, we have data, and we released it. Actually, our 2020 annual report came out about a month ago. And, if anybody's interested in looking at it, I mean, it's a really cool accountability and transparency tool so that everybody in the community can, sort of see with their own eyes and read the report to just see what's happening in the system. Those are really good tools to get a feel of how your system is working and where and why we have to keep working to make it better.
And I know you also want to strengthen jail diversion and deflection from the criminal justice system, as you mentioned earlier at the top of the interview. And this stuck out to me. It says this: general session court cases, rather than municipal and magistrate cases, are now the most frequent reason for jail use, obviously. How many of those general sessions court cases were there in 2019?
I may be smart, but I'm not that smart. Trying to get the data in the back of my head here.
Sorry.
The general sessions charges, just like everything else, things sort of like went down a little bit in 2020, but they maintained rather steady numbers. You don't see as much change in the consistency of general sessions charges as we've seen in the decrease in folks coming to jail for municipal or magistrate charges. So it's not like we've seen a spike in general sessions charges. It's just that we're not seeing as many municipal and magistrate come in.
And I know that new arrests have. Oh, yes, ma'am. And I know, too, in the press release, it says new arrests happen more often than appearances violations, and new arrests happen more often than the first 6 months of release. What are the examples of new arrests since, say, April to right now?
About for folks that release and then get in trouble again and then come back again. I haven't run them more recently, okay. But we look at it routinely, and they're all over the board. Folks, they could get arrested for something more severe or less severe than their previous charge. It's always going to be a mix.
Yes, ma'am. And let me get back to mental health quickly, because I know the commission has done an external research on the individual and community impacts by diversion and deflection. How has diversion and deflection actually impacted, say, the Charleston Mental Health Center here?
Mm-hmm. The Charleston Georgia Mental Health Center are wonderful partners in the criminal justice system and in improving the justice system. They had to close the Tri-County Crisis Stabilization Center because of COVID temporarily. And, it was interesting at the time because that was a real-time alternative drop-off that law enforcement could use. But they didn't really miss a beat because they had so many other alternatives, right? They have embedded clinicians in the law enforcement agencies. They have an embedded clinician in the 911 consolidated dispatch. And they can drop people off, bring them to the clinic on Charlie Hall Boulevard. So they really provide a great, array of services all across the board. And, those partnerships that they have with law enforcement, they've taken a long time to build, and they really do a phenomenal job with it.
You talk about
we've seen a lot of.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And you talk about the 911 dispatch. What are you looking at as far as data when it comes to diversity, inclusion in that area, mm-hmm. and equity?
So unfortunately, our data, we have over a dozen sources of data that come in, but 911 is not one of them. Maybe that will be something we can do as we grow up as an organization, as the CJCC kind of evolves from this scrappy little startup into something that's hopefully more sustainable for our community, and that we can look in the areas that we're not currently looking into through growing partnerships.
And I know also too you want to focus on fairness and reentry, and administer routine monitoring of the centralized bond court to ensure bond hearings are continually fair, just, and meaningful. Are these hearings actually fair and meaningful?
They are, one thing I will say, that work group that you just mentioned has done their homework, right? They have studied American Bar Association standards by the National Association of Pretrial Service Agencies, the South Carolina laws, and how consistent or inconsistent some of them are, and really taking a good hard look at what's happening in bond court, according to the law as well as the national standards. And that's really how that observation tool was developed. It's grounded in all of those standards, and we're piloting it now. And we hope that once sort of things let up a little bit from COVID, we can get more neutral observers in. For now, my staff are the ones that are doing it. And we're working with the judges to give them feedback. And the judges do a great job with what they have. And every day it's a challenge. And we always have to remember, they're making a decision in a moment for a day. And that individual, even if they're as bad as they want to be, if they have a money bond, they can be out the door, within a couple hours. And we have a very long time to disposition in between when that bond hearing happens and when the case comes to disposition. So there's far more activity that happens in that pretrial period than what happens in that one day of the bond hearing. And in that bond hearing, it's really looking to see, is it individualized? Is there defense representation? Is the state there? Does the victim have an opportunity? What is being said, and does the judge have consistent, reliable, and objective information, to look at all of that and weigh and make the best decisions they can.
Now, what are those activities, prior to pretrial?
Mm-hmm. So you kind of look at it from the big span, right? Like, is this something that's going to lead to jail, right? Is it something that can be handled through diversion and deflection? If it does come to jail, right, by law for most charges in South Carolina, within 24 hours of an arrest, they're entitled to a bond hearing. That may be that they qualify as indigent for public defender representation, which is one of the big changes that we made here a couple of years ago, was to put public defenders in bond court so defendants actually had representation. The judge also gets a objective assessment called the pretrial service report. And then they hear from the defense, they hear from the state, and they have the information and the facts of the case and the criminal history, and they make a decision in accordance with the law with the best information they have. So a lot happens in that first 24 hours, and then that makes a big difference on what happens next for that individual.
And let me turn over to obviously reentry. I know that you all want to partner with the United Way's SC 211 to expand access to reentry information. Why is that access limited?
So one of the things that we learned as we went through the community engagement process, right, was that there wasn't a really good centralized source for people that were justice involved to get information. We also learned this when we met with and did focus groups with people that work in the system, right? Everybody had their list. They had their go-to, right? Like, I've got my piece of paper for the 30 or so providers that I use in my role, and so-and-so's got their list. And we wanted to do something that was, sustainable, and that we could do, we didn't want to create it to where it would, be something that was unsustainable. And you've got this wonderful resource with SC 211 and TriNet United Way already out there. I don't know if you've checked them out lately, but their virtual platform, they even have an app you can download to get resources. It's, there's, why reinvent the wheel when you've got these wonderful partners out there? So we're actually in the process of hiring an AmeriCorps Vista who's going to work with 211 and us to increase the amount of information that's available for folks that are justice involved in the 211 platform, and then work here locally to help figure out good communication and marketing strategies to get that information into the hands of folks that need it. So there's a lot there, but it's just step one, right? It's let's get the services out there. Let's make sure they're all in one place, and then we'll start looking more into what works best for whom, which is a different conversation.
And what marketing strategies are ideal right now?
Now we have training available for folks, that want to learn more about 211. The folks over there are wonderful, and they will, they've trained all of our Charleston Probation and Parole Office. They've changed, the Ninth Circuit Public Defender's Office. Folks want information on it, they can get training that way. And then we're, hopefully going to envision some other neat tools and tips so that, maybe there's a video while folks are waiting in the lobby at bond court, or, different places, just to get information out there. And just let folks know that it's a complicated process, and it shouldn't be that hard to find help when you need it.
And let me go back to obviously process of the case and the advancements. I know that obviously you want to conduct regular reviews of the jail population to identify defendants that remain unnecessarily detained in pending trial for reasons other than safety or flight risks. And you told me really the current jail population. But I know too you want to expand court reminders in the court of general sessions to help maintain contact and limit missed court appearances. How many were those in 2019? So
it's just a simple text reminder, just like you would get, for like a reminder to go to the dentist, right? And that system, it was, we limited it initially to general sessions, trying to sort of figure out how to do it, and it was also limited to, the enrollment options that we had at the time. So, in 2020, towards the end of 2020, we sort of revamped that process so that anybody going to jail on a general session charge would be offered enrollment. So we wouldn't miss people that way. And we also, have seen, enrollment rates start to tick back up, which is wonderful. But the thing is, there hasn't really been a whole lot of court going on. So for now, it's just kind of reminding people, if you don't have a lawyer, here's how you can go get one.
Sure.
Because that's sort of like one of, after the bond hearing, if you don't get a lawyer that quickly, the sooner you get one, the better for all parties, sort of moving it forward. So that's really where it is now. So I think that's going to pick up a good bit in 2021, and we'll have some good data on that by the time we get to our next annual report.
Now, where was the uptake in enrollment rates?
We're starting to see, I think don't quote me, well, I'm saying this out loud, but I want to say, we went from like a, sort of a minority enrollment to now majority enrollment.
Okay.
So, and that really sort of streamlining the process makes a big difference. We found some areas, again, using data,
right,
like we do, to try to improve efficiencies. Some of the things that we did allowed us to increase reach rates for our pretrial service reports, for instance, from about half to about 90%. And again, that's just being deliberate and intelligently using the data we have to streamline where we can.
And where were those retracts back in 2018 or 2019?
The reach rates that we had for pretrial service reports were in the 50th percentile. Wow. And that we hover every month around 90 to 98%. And we didn't add any staff. We just used the data in a smarter way.
Now, speaking of which, I know research impacts of COVID-19 are on the local justice system and institutionalized lessons learned. How has COVID impacted those institutionalized lessons? And I'll let you take over with that.
One thing I think we're really grateful for pre-COVID was the effort to expedite the transfer of evidence through the discovery process.
Right.
So that was one of the things that we invested on in partnership with the solicitor's office in the county and others early on, was the technology to do that. So instead of sort of snail mail or somebody running an envelope from one office to another, now they're able to do that with the click of a button. And more law enforcement agencies and defense counsel are on it. The solicitor's office has done a remarkable job of expanding that. So it's a lot easier to get that information than it used to be, and a lot less time consuming and more efficient all across the board. So that was a really big thing. I think the use of video technology in court has also been, if it wasn't for, the folks, at the courthouse making use of WebEx and things like this, we probably wouldn't have seen any dispositions, So while the rate went down during the pandemic for sure, at least they were still able to keep moving things along. So there's a lot more opportunity to continue to utilize technology where we can, as well as drill deeper into the data. We're seeing the pending cases stack up because we weren't moving as many cases per month as we normally would with COVID. So now having the data to sort of drill deeper into the information and see, what can be done differently so that we can move more cases, and also look clearly into the kind of cases that are pending. You have to ask the question, are they all worth the court's time? Some more so than others. And those are difficult conversations and difficult questions, but they're giving us an opportunity to ask them and sort of see where they might take us in the future.
And where do you hope technology will take the court cases and court records in the future?
I think we've got a pretty good, between the clerk's office and the solicitor and the public defender,
Sure.
there's a lot of good data and technology that they're using, and they're working hard with what they can. And we've built some dashboards that help sort of track it across the board, and those really kind of help us to see, how is the backlog doing? If we keep up at this pace, what's the backlog going to be? And how can we make some strategic decisions, to help, mitigate the growth of it and make sure that people are getting the justice that they deserve in a timely manner. And those are hard to come by these days, but I think the data helps us shed light on where to put the energy and focus.
And where will the energy and focus be for the Charleston County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council 6 months from now?
6 months from now, we'll hopefully be well on our path to sustainability. We've been fortunate to have, a great investment from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, and their support of us, is dwindling. You know, we're very grateful for all that they have done for us, but we're looking to kind of stand on our own 2 feet here locally. So that will be an important piece of our future, as well as, you know, really making the most of the strategic initiatives that we have underway. Some of them, you know, we've already seen pretty good progress on, and some of them, you know, we're going to take it even farther than we thought we would, because, you know, folks are motivated to take that action and really help make a difference and better serve our community.
Kristy Danford, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you so much for having me. Hopefully I can see you in person next time.
Absolutely. I'll be right here.